Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Cacophony of Creatives webinar this evening. The topic for tonight's discussion is Art as More Than a Side Hustle, Taking Talent Seriously and to the Next Level. I'm Lynn Cornelius. I'm a board member of the Greeley Creative District, and I will be serving as the moderator tonight. So let's get started with a couple of logistics of how this will work. We've got a panel of experts representing creatives and the arts who will be discussing a number of topical questions, and those will be guided by a facilitator. Participants are muted and without video, but you may type in questions at any time via the chat button found in the navigation panel at the bottom of the screen. I'll be collecting those throughout the event, and we'll be presenting those to the artists for response in the last half hour of our event. The session is being recorded and will be posted on the Greeley Creative District's website. And this webinar is presented by the Greeley Creative District, and we are a nonprofit board whose mission is to highlight the community's distinctive creative identity and to increase its economic vitality by uplifting, encouraging, incubating, promoting, and developing the arts and creative businesses in the Greeley community. You can find out more about our board at the district at www.greeleycreativedistrict.org. Our programming is also supported by Colorado Creative Industries. Now I will pass things along to Becky Safrick, who is a board member for the Greeley Creative District, and she will be facilitating this webinar. Take it away, Becky.
Thank you, Lynn, and welcome to all that have joined us this evening. We're excited to have this group of panelists with us this evening and think that you will find this a very compelling discussion. Before we get started, we wanted to let you know a few of the panelists have had just a little bit of trouble with internet. We're going to do our very best to plow through all that, but we'll be paying attention to that throughout. So if there's some small interruptions, that's what that's about. The Greeley Creative District, which has been in place since 2012, has made it a part of its mission to bring topics of relevance and interest to our creative community, to not only amplify the issues and opportunities and resources that are available, but to give artists of all different types a voice and an opportunity to share their experience so that we can continue to create and enliven and enrich our community with the skills and talents and the resources that our creatives bring to us. And we certainly have that in spades tonight. I think you're going to really enjoy this discussion. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about in particular, and feedback that we got from many creatives in our community, is that art is sometimes doesn't always feel like it's taken seriously. And sometimes artists have a hard time taking themselves seriously and want to know, how is it that the legitimacy of my creative endeavors can be taken seriously, can be rewarded, can be recognized in different ways. And so tonight's topic, Art as More Than a Side Hustle, is all about how we take talent seriously and to the next level. And so our speakers tonight are going to talk from their unique frame of reference about that. What we're going to do to start with is we're going to spend the first hour with our panelists reacting to a couple of questions that we have about the topic. And then in the last half hour, we will take questions that you'll be chatting in and sharing that with our panelists. You can direct them to an individual or the group, or just make an observation if you like that they can react to. What we'd like to do to start is have our panelists introduce themselves. And so they will each take about 3 or 4 minutes to introduce themselves, who they are, the topic that they are representing, and a little bit about their own creative journey. I'm going to be calling on them individually, and then after we are done with introductions, we'll start in with some of the questions. So to start out, we'd like Travis Krause to provide his introduction and get us started. So Travis.
All right. Hello, everybody. I hope my microphone is working. I really appreciate people being here, and I hope you take a lot out of it and you find it super valuable. Personally, I'm just here for the hors d'oeuvres, but, but I'll move forward into my introduction. I have a pretty diverse background. I mean, from merchandising motorcycle apparel to being a janitor to working in a frame shop. And at last count, I had like 32 different professional gigs. I think about half of them have been in some sort of art capacity. And most recently, I've been working at Greeley West High School, like most consistently for about 20 some years. I also lead workshops for teachers and educators around the globe. I consult with different schools all over the planet. So that gives me a lot of, I guess, media to work with. I've done everything from ceramics, which I was trained in, to steel, to public art, to assemblage, to poetry. But I think what I'm really most well known for currently is my paintings that serve my mission to remind people about how powerful they are when they forget that stuff. So what I was going to say really quick and hopefully get some interaction from people is one thing that people do with imposter syndrome is they forget to celebrate their successes. So it'd be really awesome in the chat right now if you just put one win you had recently in your art making, in your creative capacity, whatever that would be. Could be finishing a sketchbook page, or delivering an artwork, or picking up your guitar for the first time in a week. So that's my intro. We'll keep moving on here though.
Right. Thank you, Travis. Great start. Next, we'd like to have Tim Coons offer his introduction.
That's a great question to start with, Travis. Celebrating the wins. That's excellent. My name is Tim Coons, and I've lived in Greeley for around 20 plus years now, and love being here. I'm originally from Kansas, and right now I work at the Weld Community Foundation. I am their marketing and communications person, and I love the work. The Community Foundation is a nonprofit that's here in Greeley, Colorado. And we work with donors who will set up funds, and then we grant out towards nonprofits, and we grant out towards scholarships for students, each year giving around $1 million back into Weld County for support where it's really needed. And so it's very meaningful work. I love being able to be a part of it and to get to tell those stories. I have also in my life been professionally a singer-songwriter and then a worship director. So Travis, you're hitting on this idea of like, as creatives, we juggle a whole lot. Like there's a whole lot of balls in the air often when it comes to doing creative work. And I've learned to love that. Like I really have enjoyed all these different hats that I've gotten to wear over the years. Really, I would say creatively where I started was as a singer-songwriter. What I wanted to do was to write songs that were my own songs that could communicate to people and impact folks at some sort of emotional level, some sort of spiritual level. And I would say that learning how to do that and to work towards that craft, that's the foundation from which my other creative work really has come from. Whether I'm writing an email or doing a podcast, it really has this heart behind it of telling the story and connecting with people and relaying something that conveys a certain feeling or emotion. And yeah, what my topic is tonight, so Travis said he's imposter syndrome. My topic is posting the story or sharing the story. And so that's kind of the heart. I think I approach everything as a songwriter, to be honest. So yeah, I hope tonight will be very helpful for you all, and I know that I'm excited to hear from folks that some of you guys on the panel that I've never had a chance to meet before. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tim. Very helpful. Our next panelist is Sarah Off.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent, super. First off, I would love to just thank the Greeley Creative District for having me on this panel, and have to say how incredibly honored I am to be joining other incredible creatives and community members. And this is an exciting thing for me because I'm relatively new to the Greeley community. I just moved here a little over a year ago and began my position at University of Northern Colorado as assistant professor for violin and music business. Prior to that, I spent about a decade in Arizona, and I was pursuing my master's and my doctorate degree in violin performance at ASU. But while I was there, I spent a lot of time performing and a lot of time teaching. So I would say my two passions are definitely teaching, education, and performance. I'm sure that many of you can probably relate to that for sure. My topic for tonight is arts advocacy and professional development, which sounds like two separate things, but I really feel like they go hand in hand because just to leave a thought out there to get everything started, I feel like effective advocacy really comes down to believing in what you do and believing in what you have to offer, and knowing that, and this ties right into imposter syndrome, knowing that the arts really are a need, and that if you are genuinely creating something and putting it into the world, you are filling a need, which is in itself an advocacy for the arts. So again, this is just a really lovely thing to be a part of, and I thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you, Sarah. We're glad you're here as well. Brianna Harris will be our next panelist to introduce. And by the way, Brianna is also a former member of our board and works with us with our creative endeavors and marketing as well. Brianna.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Brianna Harris. I am a musician, artist manager, and creative entrepreneur. My topic tonight is kind of from the perspective of how to find resources for artists, maybe specifically during this COVID era, but also more broadly throughout your career. And my background is that I am a saxophonist by trade. Went to jazz school, actually went twice, like did an undergrad and a master's degree in jazz studies as a jazz saxophonist, and then have, like a lot of other people in this panel, done a whole host of other things since then. So some of the things I currently do, I own, manage, and perform in a 9-piece original funk and soul band called The Burros, which is based here out of Greeley, Colorado, and works both regionally and occasionally nationally. I also own and am the lead manager at Harris Artist Management, which is my own boutique full service management and artist consulting business, where I work with multidisciplinary creatives to kind of manage their whole career and strategy. And then I do work with a lot of arts nonprofit clients, or have in the past. I've in previous lives have been at UNC as the marketing coordinator for the College of Performing and Visual Arts. I do currently work some with the Greeley Creative District, doing some marketing support, as well as the Fort Collins Musicians Association, doing some marketing support. So a whole host of things. And I love to talk about everything that's at the intersection of art and business and how we live our actual lives, because it's all connected. It doesn't have to be siloed. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight. So.
Very nice. Thank you, Brianna. Our caboose panelist tonight is David Sharp, and I'll let David introduce himself.
Hello, my name is David Sharp. So I am one of the panelists who's been having internet connectivity issues. Earlier today, my area was completely out. So they have promised to let me know if I start cutting out, and we'll do our best to not have choppy presentation here. So I am a writer and also a librarian. I've lived in the Greeley area for 6 years now. Before that, I lived in Texas, which is where I grew up and spent about a decade in Austin, in the Austin area. So lots of heavy arts scenes there, lots of music, lots of theater, lots of great stuff. I got my start writing actually doing theater. There was a small theater in my hometown, and so we kind of got started writing plays and then putting them on, and that was just a lot of fun. And I found that I really enjoyed the writing aspect. So, but I also really enjoy being a librarian, and those things play very well into one another. So I've published some short stories, and I have a novel that's due to relaunch under a new imprint come July of next year. So my topic is resources, which goes very well under my librarian umbrella. Resources for writers, but I think also for other artists as well. I think that a lot of these things will be fairly universal. I am a member of the Northern Colorado Writers and contribute to their blog. They host a lot of conferences, and so I've had a lot of opportunities to talk to literary agents, editors, publishers from lots of different houses. And so I've heard lots of great advice. I'll try to pass on as much as I can to you. So
Thank you, David. I think you can see that we have a creative, rich panel tonight and lots of material to cover. So we're going to start with some questions. But for those of you who may just be tuning in, this is the Greeley Creative District webinar, Art as a Side Hustle. And this is a panel discussion about taking talent seriously and to the next level. Anyone tuning in can submit a question for our panelists via the chat button that's at the bottom of your screen. So our first question tonight, and we're going to just, I'll probably start with Travis since this is close to his topic area to start with, but we'll ask every one of you to, when you're ready, to just raise your hand and when you're ready to respond to the question as well. So the first question for our panelists tonight is, why do creatives question their legitimacy? And what are your own strategies to combat imposter syndrome? So Travis, could we start with you?
Okay, so I was taught to repeat the question. One of it is why are creatives, why do they experience this imposter syndrome? And then how do I combat it, right? Perfect. So I did some digging around, and because I don't know if I really felt like an imposter as an artist, but maybe an imposter as a creative entrepreneur. And so what I really, over time had to come to at peace with, I guess you would say, is that sometimes it's 100% okay to have your artwork as a hobby. Being an amateur is a great thing, right? If you have a deep passion for something. In fact, the word amateur means to love, amor, right? And so you do it more out of love than a desire to have profit, which is totally fine. And for some reason, people, maybe they want more out of it. And so if you're a person who wants more, owning a business it's another couple of steps, right? You know, if you want to be somebody that is a creative entrepreneur that owns a creative business, you're going to be doing things like profit and loss statements. And you're going to probably talk to somebody about intellectual property and some of those things. So what I wanted to say is my personal belief is you are what you do. So if you walk around town, you look down at your shoes and there's paint on your shoes because you were painting last night, you're probably a painter, right? If your guitar is sitting in the corner and it's tuned up and you walk by and you pick it up and you start playing and you do that often, you're a musician. You're creating those things, right? So I'm not sure where people get their pressure from to feel differently about it, but I want to assure people that they're okay if they just enjoy making art. Totally fine. I think if you want to make that next step, that next leap to running a business and making it profitable, what you really need to do is start defining what that success looks like. And so everybody's going to have a different viewpoint of that success. It could be, I want all my bills paid for by my passion. I want extra cash from my art sales or my gigs. And that's okay. That's one definition. Somebody might think, hey, my definition of success is that I just have 5 hours a week in my studio where it's just all mine. So I think a really important part of imposter syndrome is sitting down with yourself, really getting to know yourself and really defining what success is to you, not the outside world. Don't listen to anybody else, but define it for yourself. So I would like to invite people in the chat to write down one measure that they could have in their life that would mean that they were a successful artist, right? It could be a dollar amount, it could be time spent, but it's something that you could measure and it's really, really specific. For me, as an example, I'm sending out selling at least 3 artworks per month. I can count that and I know I'm doing what I set out to do. So that's my 25 cents there. Thank you.
A great way to start us out. How do you individually define success? Who'd like to also respond next to that question? Sarah.
I almost forgot to unmute. You think I'd have the hang of that by now. Travis, I think that was beautifully put. I actually I would like to reemphasize this idea of success. It's something that I'm sure we've all spent a lot of time thinking about. And I think, as you were talking about, I think a lot of imposter syndrome and those pressures come from societal expectations and how success has been defined for us and sort of superimposed on our perception of success as artists. And I think in a way there can be some positivity drawn from that as far as being motivated to maybe go to greater heights. But I think it's also very important to make sure that you're checking why you're wanting to do that and that it aligns with your definition of success. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I completely agree. I think another thing too that helps me when I'm feeling the pressures of imposter syndrome is it's sort of the same as when I feel performance anxiety. And what I tell my students often is performance anxiety is just proof that you care. And I think that imposter syndrome's the same way, that, you know, when I go into the kitchen and I bake some bread, which I love to do, I don't feel like an imposter because even though I enjoy it, it's not something I care as much about my level of, you know, creativity and how good at it I am. But I think when we really care about something that we're doing, especially creatively, when it's so intimately connected with who we are as a human being, it's pretty easy to start to feel that imposter syndrome. But if you can realign your thinking and say, you know what, I'm feeling this because I care, it automatically centers you and you feel like, no, because I care, I have something to say. It's genuine and it's important. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, labels that we put on ourselves are a big part of how you self-identify, is a part of how others will see you as well. Tim, you look like you were about ready to respond. Are you
Oh,
ready?
yeah, sure. Some of the notes that I had on that question was quite a little bit of what Travis was hitting on, and then built on with Sarah as well. I think naming the things in which our culture says these are the markers of success has been helpful for me, and I think we would all come at these with maybe different answers, but what I see as prevalent markers of success that people say, okay, now you're successful, is if your art makes money or if your art gives you popularity. If art and popularity, or money and popularity, and those are okay markers, but it's not the end all be all. That's not the defining of am I legit. In fact, there's a whole host of things, and so what you guys are talking about of like defining what legitimacy looks like to you. And that might mean, you know, I can finally play this passage in this way, or I made this person cry with this painting, you know. like there are different ways in which we find our legitimacy. And one of the things that's been helpful for me, and this just speaks to the heart of why I create, or and what motivates me. So speaking towards the things that I love to place on as markers for myself is for many years. And I heard this, like, I think my wife, Bethany, who's also an artist in town, she shared this with me. It was like a blog post or something that she read by this motivational speaker guy who would go around. And they asked him, like, what's your definition of success? Or, you know, what's your mindset when you go into a room and deliver? And he was like, I don't worry about how great I'm going to do. I don't worry about how many books I'm going to sell. I actually go into a room and I say, just love them. Just love them. Love the people that are in this room. And so for years, I'll be leading a concert or hosting a worship event or putting on a podcast. And I step back and I say, I want to do good. I want to perform well. I want to like provide an experience for people. I want to sell CDs, or we don't sell CDs anymore, but you know, merch or whatever. But at the very, very end and all be all for me, it's just love them. Love these people. Be a part of this conversation where you can give whatever gifts you can tonight. And that to me has helped me kind of throw out the whole imposter thing and just be like, no, I'm legit. I'm here to love people and I'm here to share some things and be a part of this conversation.
It's very powerful and strong message for a lot of folks to remind ourselves of why you do what you do. What occurs to me with what several of you are saying is that your art is such an extension of yourself. There's also some vulnerability there as well. But when you be a part of the process, it's a little bit, changes the tone a little bit. Bree or David, either one of you would like to go next? Bree?
Yeah, so everyone said such great things about this so far. And one thing I will add is that I think one of the reasons we get imposter syndrome is because we don't actually have a good idea of like what it looks like when professional artists are working. And I mean that in every sense of it. Like we have this image conjured up in our head of what that is. It's like, it's someone who like they're in their studio for 40 hours a week, like just creating, or they're a musician and they're on tour with this whole team, you know, that's really polished and taking care of all their business. Or they're a writer who like has this beautiful space set up in their house. And what I have had the, you know, the great like privilege of learning through being involved in a lot of different facets of the industry, and especially doing management, is like everyone's life is still a mess. Like, like even if you're ascending to these greater heights in the industry, like no one has it all together. And this particular time period has been such a great reminder of that, as you're literally taken into people's homes and you get to see that everyone's just people. And then from like a client perspective, it's the same. I've gotten to do some things this year with clients that I've never done before, like pitching, you know, major art licensing projects, like talking about really big long-term contracts, dealing with intellectual property, all of these things, and like working on brand new stuff all the time. And I have gotten into those conversations like kind of nervous, but it's always worked out great, because what I realize is like when a client is hiring you to do something, like they're trusting you to be the expert. Like you're already in the room. You don't have to prove anything. There's no test like that you have to pass. Like you just have to come and do your best work, and like ask for help when you need it. There's nothing wrong with that. And the last thing I'll say too is like, especially for those of us who wear a lot of different hats, you are the one who gets to decide how you define yourself and present yourself to the world. There's no requirement that you say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I'm an artist, but I also have this other job. And like, I only do this. Like, there's no test to pass. You get to decide how you lead, you know, what info you lead with and how you present yourself in the world. And you have the right to claim your space as an artist, regardless of what it actually looks like in your life.
That's very nice and affirming about you're in control of this trip that you're on. So David, would you like to share your thoughts too?
Absolutely, thank you. Everyone said wonderful stuff so far. I think everyone's really hitting on kind of what the problem is, and then sort of what the solution is as well. And that a lot of it is.
Okay, David, we've got you cutting out a little bit here. All right, David, we're not hearing you at this point, and so I'm going to try it again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Now we can, yeah.
Okay, here. So a lot of the folks that we would designate as people who have made it, who are absolutely successful, who are more wildly successful than we could ever dream of being in whatever our field is, I feel that a lot of these are folks who not only have dealt with imposter syndrome, but also many of them, if we do a little research, we'll find that they still deal with imposter syndrome. Just a few examples that I happen to know. I know that Maya Angelou is quoted saying that after having written 11 books, she still feels like any minute now they're going to find out. They're going to find me out and realize I've been a fraud the whole time, you know? So if she can feel that way, then I feel like we can take from that this is not a feeling that just ever goes away because we succeeded more. You know, even as we're achieving success in whatever our field is, there's always another hill to climb. You know, I feel like you can get to one and you're going to look at the next hill and say, maybe when I get there, then I'll feel like I'm valid. And I think that that's the thing that we have to be very wary of. So all of the things that folks have said already, we've got to define what that success looks like for ourselves. And I think sometimes we also have to just stop and take a look at this moment here and enjoy this moment on the journey. What is the view like? Are we going to get further on this road and look back on this nostalgically and be like, oh, I remember when I was just at that point, just another quick anecdote about famous people, though. So Neil Gaiman, author, who was invited to a big dinner banquet where they were honoring a lot of people who were movers and shakers in the world, had created all kinds of great things. He felt absolutely like he did not belong. And so he talked about how inadequate he felt having a conversation with Neil Armstrong, everybody else, and says, look at all these people. All I ever did was go where people told me. Neil Gaiman saying, well, you were the first person to walk on the moon, So, I think that we just have to understand that everybody, no matter how successful, they still feel like they haven't arrived. So hopefully that's comforting. Maybe it's not, but I think that it's absolutely true. So.
Thank you, David. I think that's a great summary for reflecting on perspective. That perspective is different depending on no matter how great you are. Very good. Now, several of you mentioned something that leads us right into our next question. Most of you have multiple areas of discipline. I don't know if anybody has 35 like Travis, but having a lot of areas of discipline, employment, and areas of creativity are something that's fairly common with creatives. Can you talk to us about how the multiplicity of your various endeavors influences your work as an artist or creative? Anyone like to start with that one? Bree.
Yeah, so I can start with that. Like I said, I am a musician by trade. That's kind of like my primary creative outlet. And then a lot of the other work I've done is kind of like music industry or arts industry related. But I've found it all to be like super connected. And even like music is a huge bubble, right? Like there's music performance, there's music production, composition, songwriting, like arranging, all of these things. And one of the best things that I learned like in music school, and that's definitely been part of my career too, is like it, all of that serves each other, right? And I think like I had a friend kind of talk about this recently. Probably everyone out there has read some version of like the 10,000 hours Malcolm Gladwell sort of rule about, mastering anything. Essentially it requires like, at least 10,000 hours approximately to kind of gain mastery of a skill. Well, I think if you have a core artistic discipline where you've put in that time, when you're picking up something else that's related, it doesn't necessarily take you 10, because like you're not starting from scratch. You're building on the skills you already have. So that's what I would say is like, especially right now, like all of us are going to have to, all of us in our careers will like retrain at something. It's just inevitable. It's kind of like part of the economy and part of the job market now. And so kind of looking at it from that perspective of like, we all are capable of learning new things. And when we learn new things, we don't have to start from scratch. So that's kind of how I think about those building blocks.
Thank you. Travis, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I just, my general belief about people is they're immensely creative, like everybody. And it could be you're just a master whiz in the kitchen, and you can cook something with hardly any ingredients, or you can run a family like nobody's business or an organization. And so people have this immense amount of creativity. And so I think sometimes we spend a lot of time exploring and experimenting and playing with all the different facets of our own creativity. And so I think, as you get closer to your passion or your project or understanding your mission, you can start focusing in, or like Bree said, you can start intertwining those things to make them more impactful. So I would say for anybody out there who's like, oh God, I feel creative, but I don't trust, but I do all these things and I'm all over the place and blah, blah, blah. It's fine. Play, experiment, explore, and then it'll start to point you in the right direction just naturally, at least in my experience. And it's a process that I found you can't really rush at all. And the other thing for me was that when I was a little bit more immature, whenever that was, I kind of resented having to work so hard and work at all these different jobs and do all this different stuff. But really, it gave me a bunch of rich content and subject matter that can inform my art making, that if I took those experiences, they made me a better artist. Even though I wasn't focused on my art at the moment, I got to see the world through all these different lenses, which is ultimately the goal of somebody being creative, is to allow other people to see the world in a way they haven't ever viewed it before. So yeah, I say go out, play, explore. Don't worry about it. When you start hitting your stride, just keep going and focus.
Sounds like in so many ways too, the advice is that creativity isn't limited to arts and traditional kind of forms, that we need it in all parts of our lives in different ways. Some other thoughts about multiplicity? Yeah, Sarah.
Once again, I'm going to dovetail off of what Travis said. I think we're sharing a brain. I totally agree. I think that it's really kind of it's kind of funny because when I was an undergraduate, I spent 1,000 hours in the practice room a week. Maybe not quite that much, but close. And I think that's a pretty common expectation that, you know, in order to master your craft, you spend this much time in the practice rooms. And if your fingers aren't bleeding, you're not doing it right, you know. And I think that that's, yes, there's a certain amount of discipline that you have to have and a certain amount of focus, sure. But what I never understood about that is, how am I supposed to incorporate human elements, humanity, and the reflection of life into my music if I'm not living, and if I'm not experiencing things with other people and observing, you know, others, you know, navigate their way through life, and enjoying simple things like walking out in the aspen trees, you know, just, I mean, I know that sounds cheesy, but it's really, really true. I think that we are inspired individuals as humans. But I think that we have to continually feed ourselves as well and fill ourselves up. And when we're giving to our art and not refilling, so to speak, it can be not as effective and not as fruitful. So that would be my first thing, that I think it's really important to be to have a lot of experiences so that your art is, you know, a reflection of that. And then my other perspective on having a diverse set of things that you're doing in your life is, there is so much that I have encountered that I didn't know I loved. You know, when I was younger, I thought, well, I'm going to play the violin. Like, that's all I care about. That's all I want to do, just all day long, every day, forever. And then I discovered that I love to teach, and I had no idea, you know, and then I discovered that I actually really love to write, and I love to hike, and I love to do all these other things. And no matter how distant they are from each other on the surface, they really are interrelated. So yeah, I think it's important to pursue diversity in your experiences and in your career, because you might actually come upon a passion you didn't even know you had, which is kind of fun. So.
You're not the same person as you were yesterday, so give yourself permission for that. Good. Tim or David, would you either like to respond to that?
I can
Tim?
go. Yeah, so talking about doing a multiple kind of wearing so many different hats. I've had different people, because working at the foundation has been new for me for the past year and a half plus. I've had several people ask, how did you end up in marketing? How did you end up in communications if you're you know, doing music? And I said, well, it's from wearing all these different hats. I worked at a church. I would, you know, produce their services and do special events, and then I would do all my singer-songwriter stuff. And I learned that like this is a bad thing to say, but like you can work really hard at an event. And it's like no one came to your event, bro. And then like you can work really hard on an album and it's like no one bought your album. And I had to learn how to share these things. I had to learn how to talk about sharing the event and inviting people to the event. And I had to talk about the album and share the album and invite people to listen to the album. And so wearing all those different hats kind of led me to these new places and these new understandings and these new skills. And I want to, say this to a panel of people who are learning to be creative, who are listening, and also to say this to just remind myself of this. It's one of my favorite things that I think I've learned over the years is that all creative projects have three stages to them. And creative projects have the creating side, the producing side, and the sharing side of it. And I know that for myself in my life, I get excited about creating and writing the songs. And oh man, I love writing the songs and like just getting into my own brain and creating. And that's so much fun. The producing side of it of like, okay, now I have to like get musicians to come and to do rehearsals, and I have to schedule the studio time. And I like, that's a little bit harder. But it's fun when it gives birth to something that you believe in and that you're so excited about. And for so many years, I did those first two stages, and then I wouldn't do the third stage. And it's taken a long time of learning wearing those different hats to say, then you have to share. You have to say, I'm excited about this. I want to be in conversation with you all, and I think that you will find this valuable too. And I want to share my heart. I love the line, that which is most personal is often most universal. And so when you're creating something, it's meaningful to you, producing something, share it because it's going to strike a chord with somebody.
That's lovely. And I think my observation is that an awful lot of artists are also introverts, and it doesn't come naturally to always share. So a reminder that just helps you hone your craft a little bit more too.
You can hire Bree. She's going to represent you.
I always laugh at that because I'm like one of the most extreme extroverts I know, and I hear on artists to be much more loud and proud than they might be used to being.
That's why we need everybody, right? Good. David, do you have some thoughts about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that art often art reflects life, so you have to live some life to be able to reflect it. If you're a master at your craft, whatever it is, a musician, music invokes an emotion or an ambiance or something like that. It's got to be something that you felt, that you know how to do it. Ernest Hemingway used to say that writing was a process of bleeding on the page. So I feel that definitely the more that you can get out there, and meet people and interact with people and try new things, try new things that end up horribly, within reason. Jack London would actually put himself in dangerous situations, went to war so that he could inform himself how to write about war, I wouldn't recommend that necessarily, but he certainly felt that he had to live the thing before he could write the thing. And I think that with the arts, that's definitely important. I know that for writing, I can sit down and if I have perfect sentence structure, that's great. But what goes in the sentence is going to be a whole lot more important than where I'm putting the commas and the punctuation. So
nice way to think about that. That life is what you're extending through your art and your creativity, and it's all part of the equation. For those that are just tuning in, this is the Greeley Creative District Cacophony of Creatives webinar on art as more than a side hustle, taking talent seriously into the next level. And we have a group of panelists that are responding to questions and interacting with us on that. And for you, the audience, we would encourage you to chat in your questions to the panelists and things you'd like to contribute in the way of the conversation, but certainly questions that we'll be answering with them at the end. You can do that with the chat button at the bottom of your screen. So the next question for you all is, what do you think might be the persistent myths about art and creativity that have been a challenge for you to overcome or confront in your own work? Those things that you either heard about or thought were true or somebody projected onto you. What have you dealt with as far as false truths? Yeah, Sarah.
I'm going to jump on this one because I have a lot to say, but I'll make it quick. I think that this is a really pertinent question for me specifically because, and I'm sure for everybody, but my own personal experience with this has been, again, this idea of defining success and it being defined by things that have nothing to do with the art itself. So as a musician, if I don't play in Carnegie Hall and get, I'm critically reviewed by the New York Times and perform with so-and-so and play such and such piece and, release 16 albums and win a Grammy and whatever else, I'm not successful and my art doesn't count. And I think that that's extremely dangerous because none of that matters. And yes, those things are great motivators, I would love to play in Carnegie Hall one day, so I'm going to practice really hard. That's great. But ultimately, why? What is it that you're hoping to gain from that experience? And what is it that you're hoping to give from that experience? And that if we can kind of take a step back and remove the elements from those myths that make them seem true, but that are more true on their own, that can be really helpful. So for example, if I am really concerned about what venue I play in, maybe just taking a step back and saying, well, but why does that matter? Why does it matter where my art is housed? Is it more important that the people that I'm sharing it with are moved in some way or connected in some way or whatever my goal might be? And do I need a specific venue for that to happen? Do I need to play with specific people for that to happen? And do I need a critic to tell me I'm great in order for that to happen? And so that's been a pretty persistent myth for me in the music industry for sure. And even now, I think because we're driven by our egos sometimes, because we're all human, I have to remind myself that no, that's not why I do this. And though that may be fun and might look nice on a resume, ultimately, that's not the stuff I'm going to look back on and say, wow, that was really awesome. It's the moments that are meaningful for the right reasons. So.
Very nice. Who would like to build on that?
Yeah, so I think like a big, myth, or at least like a story that's told about art and creativity, or in specifically like a career in the arts, is that it has to be hard. It has to be hard. It has to feel hard. Like somehow if like it doesn't, then you're not doing it right. And I kind of mean that in every way, like, maybe the discipline itself has to feel hard. The lifestyle often is like really pitched as being really hard. So if you're a musician, pre-COVID, the model is like, if you're successful, you're on the road for 6 or 9 months a year, and you don't get to see your family, and you sleep in a van, and like, all these things. And I think what I've learned, or what I'm, in the process of learning more, is you have the power to shape like what you want art to look like in the context of the rest of your life. And especially if you're running an artistic business, like eventually you're going to have to get to a point too where like it doesn't feel as hard. Like I think a thing we run into is like, especially early career, is like we feel like we were working so hard, like we feel totally maxed out on bandwidth. And then someone's like, well, you also have to do this to get to the next level. And you're like, how am I going to do that? I can't fit in like another thing on top of that. So the thing I'd add to that that's also a myth is like nobody does all of this alone forever. Who is successful? Like they outsource tasks, they hire teams, and that looks different for everyone. Like it doesn't have to mean, oh, you suddenly have this big fancy manager or agent or publicist or anything, but like maybe you're outsourcing like a small errand in your home that gives you an hour a week to work on your art. Or maybe you've like hired someone to work on your website instead of doing it yourself. So that's the other myth too, is like nobody is completely self-made. Everyone gets help at some point.
We don't need to have a whole bunch of starving artists everywhere, right?
No.
Good point. Yeah, Travis.
Starving artists. Yeah. So suffering and starving, that's like a big deal. So I'm just going to put some numbers to it and squash one of those myths really quick. In 2017, they put out an economic report for Colorado, and the arts and entertainment were the third biggest input into Colorado's economy with like $14 billion, which I couldn't count. So it doesn't really matter on that number. But the important thing is it was only beat out by construction and retail. That means arts and entertainment put more money into Colorado's economy than gas and oil and marijuana and all kinds of other stuff that you would think put tons of money in, including tourism, which is huge. All right. And so one of the myths that I really would like to see destroyed is that, somebody's like, I would love a life in the arts. And everybody's like, well, have a backup plan, be sensible. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Somebody's got to be making this money because art apparently affects us. In my view, I heard this from somebody smarter than me. They said art really rules the world. And I thought about it for a long time and I'm like, oh, yes, it does. Because if people have any kind of disposable income or sometimes not, they're buying things that are aesthetic experiences or objects or things that hit them emotionally that are manifested through the arts. So that is one myth I would really like to see go away, because I think, like I said, everybody has this huge creative potential. And I would love for people to feel, I don't know, emboldened to embrace an effort to go try it out and see if it really is what they love. So I hope that myth dies soon. Please help me kill it. My mentor, I'm helping her kill it. So help me help her.
Awesome. Let's, okay, that's a commitment for the evening. We'll kill that myth. David, would you like to offer some thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to build on that, I think that artists are also seen not only as starving, but they have to be eccentric and tormented and unapproachable sometimes. And sometimes I feel that I have known a few folks who were starting their art journey, and they wanted to play the part as well as they could. So they were trying to be as eccentric as possible. When you see movies or books, a lot of times if there's an artist who's a character, they're going to create some kind of painting that you just have to get it. And if you don't get it, you just don't get it. So I think that it's worth saying that I find most artists that I have met are actually very approachable. They are human beings, and that is one of the best things that I have learned about this journey. Every time I've met a literary agent, of course, that makes me choke up like, oh golly, here they are, the literary professionals. And it's amazing how human they are, and editors, painters, everyone I've met, musicians, all very human, all very approachable. And I think that, the purpose of art really is not to try to go above everybody's head. I think the purpose of art is to make a connection. And the purpose of an artist is to make a connection. I think most artists really actually try to work toward that end. So I think it would be nice if we could let that one go just a little bit, because art is really for everybody. And I think that most artists would certainly agree with that.
Yeah, we don't need anybody cutting off their ears or heading into mental institutions just because they're an artist. So, Tim, would you like to wrap up this question for us?
Yeah, I'll do two short myths that I've been learning and needing to address in my own life and my own journey. The first one is de-romanticizing being an artist, and I think we all have talked a little bit about that at some point. But like, we have this kind of like big picture of what it will be like to be an artist, or for me, a musician, and the act of de-romanticizing for me has been like, oh, this takes a lot of work. This takes a lot of work and effort. But I would say the same thing over anything that is worthwhile in life. I had a really romantic view of what marriage or being a father or like having a career was going to look like. And in the end, it's like, you have this field and you're going to roll up your sleeves and work really hard, and it's going to take years to produce the fruit. And And so setting aside the romantic side of me to just be real and make the things has been one myth. The second myth that I wanted to say was that, and this is big for me as an artist, it was hard to say and embrace. I was at a forum and they were like talking about these values that this one place had. And one of the values was, and this was for artists. One of the values was think institutionally. And what they meant was, as an artist, a lot of times you feel like the bad guys are the institution or the man or the people with money who are very organized and they're not like you. And you know what? The institution doesn't trust you either. And it was this like really, really funny, like what you need to do is think institutionally. These folks need you. They need you to apply to make the murals. They need you to bring in new, fresh language to explain what they do for the world. Am I making sense? Like schools and businesses, and they run in this way that has this hierarchy. And as an artist, we're a little outside that. We're a little dangerous to that. But when I came home from that seminar, like I remember talking with my wife and being like, this was a game changer for me. And she started applying to the city to do murals. And it was just something that she hadn't really thought of before. But it was like this great think institutionally. Yeah, like they do have walls they want to beautify and they have a budget. And so like she started applying and I would say that similar things had happened in my life of taking away that myth of like, don't work with those folks because but like you were saying, David, they're all people, we're all approachable, and we actually have really awesome things to offer to each other.
Very nice. Very nice. And we have all benefited from that public art on a huge scale. Yeah. One of you talked about this just a little bit. So the next question is, what are the advantages or disadvantages of having a plan A to be a creative, but a plan B just in case? How does that help or hurt the effort? Who might like to go first on that one? All right, Bree, I'm going to pick on you.
Cool. So I think either mindset can work if your plan is proactive and not just reactive. And what I mean by that is like, you know, this is something like I've gotten so much better at in my own career in life, because when I started out in music, I think I was like kind of a strange kid because my like stated goal was like not I want to be a superstar or saxophonist. I was basically just like I want to make a living doing something in music or music adjacent and like have like a comfortable living as an 18-year-old. And then I kind of got through college and like early career, and it's like, oh, that goal was like not hard. Like, and it also was like not very specific. And so since then, like I've like had to set like way bigger goals and like way more specific goals and realize like getting to any of them is just setting a system in place. And I think what happens with a lot of artists is like they set out just kind of in general to do their creative discipline and they get, you know, a first contract or first gig or first job or whatever. And that kind of like keeps pulling them in one direction or another. And if you don't stop and assess, like, is that the pathway you really want to be on? Is it working for you? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? Like that can kind of shape your whole entire path if you aren't proactively asking yourself like what you really want and then making a plan to go after it. I think, you know, being all in on your art is great, but have a plan and like be realistic about how that matches like other parts of your lifestyle that are important to you. So if you're all in on music and being a performing musician, but you're kind of a homebody, until this year anyways, that would have been sort of a challenge, most likely, because you just like those things don't necessarily align. So you have to ask yourself if you're going to be happy doing that. Having a plan B or like, you know, a day job, like however you want to frame it, can be extremely helpful. Like I basically planned out my business and like soft launched it while I still had a full-time salary and benefits. So I think it just like any of it can work, but you have to kind of take radical responsibility for asking yourself what you want and then like making a plan to sort of pursue that.
I love that term of radical responsibility. That's one for Webster for sure, I think. Who'd like to go next? Yeah, Travis.
I think what Bree said pretty much wrapped up my thoughts, is that everybody's going to have their own level of risk tolerance. And so whatever people need to do for them, they have to have enough life experience to know themselves well enough to make sure that their goals fit their values and their personality. That being said, jobs that we thought were really stable right now have not turned out to be so. Plans that people have had for a long time, traditionally, that would work out and provide long-term safety, are not doing that currently. So I would say the ultimate thought I would have on this would to be very adaptable, to be very flexible, to not get stuck with an unrealistic idea and hold on to it no matter what, but to actually learn and grow and learn and grow and evolve yourself and take what you learn and apply it all the time, because that's going to be ultimately the most valuable thing you can do. And expect yourself to change as a person. I mean, who you are, your abilities, your skill sets, your connections and resources are all going to change. So it's every once in a while you need to step back and reflect on that and reevaluate if you're in the place you should be or if you need to go further. So I think life's at risk, and being adaptable is probably your surest shot of surviving it.
What an interesting image that brings up too, that a lot of visual artists are reminded that when they're hard at work at a painting, they need to step back every now and then and make sure that it's still evolving the way that they anticipate and that they're not too close to the details that they can't see the big picture. So who'd like to go next? Yeah, Sarah.
I'd like to answer this in kind of two parts. And the first part is this idea that having a plan B is somehow bad. And I think it's just been unfortunately defined as, well, oh, you didn't make it, so you better go to plan B. And I just don't think that that's true. I think what Travis just said about being adaptable and knowing that you're going to change as a person, and that doesn't mean that you go from plan A to, oh, down here to plan B. That's not how it works. I think it's really important to realize that you can fulfill spaces in your life in a lot of different ways, that your, ultimate goal, your dream job doesn't have to be just this one tiny little bubble of something that's super strictly defined, but that if you really actively think about diversifying that and pulling from that what means something to you, and then looking at what different areas those things can actually exist in, that can really help get rid of this plan A, plan B, that's it, right? I also think it's really important to continue to encourage each other and everyone in the arts world and outside the arts world and just in general, that working a job that is not an arts job is not a bad thing. And we've all done it and we all do it, and that is totally fine. That you don't have to be spending 100% of your career being an artist in order to be an artist, which was, kind of talked about earlier in the conversation. I think that I don't think I've ever met a musician that doesn't do a million different things. And I think that that's just what it looks like these days, that, landing a full-time orchestra gig that pays enough that you can actually live off of it is probably pretty rare. So yeah, being willing to diversify and being willing to redefine how you look at that, I think is the trick to it. But
so it's not either or, it's either and. So David, you look like you were ready to offer some thoughts too.
So my thoughts kind of play into what Sarah was saying, just kind of looking at the whole thing much more holistically. Just speaking from my own personal experience, I'm a librarian and I'm a writer. I always knew I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know if I wanted to be a librarian, but I really like it quite a bit. I will say that making a career out of writing was never my plan. I simply wanted to be able to do it. I wanted to have a life where I could pursue my writing. And so that's what was important to me. So I don't know if that makes it a plan A or a plan B. I wanted a job that would support me, but then also kind of play into and help inform my writing and give me the experiences that I wanted to have to be able to write better. And so being surrounded by great books, by great authors, having access to all of the resources that a library offers is wonderful. So I don't necessarily see it as a component of my writing, but I don't necessarily see it as not a component of my writing either. I have designed my life to be a holistic thing that lets me have a family, write, have a job that I enjoy, work with people, and all of those things kind of play into and out of one another. So for folks who
Looks like we lost you again, David, in terms of your audio. Try again. No. Okay, we will have you hold that. Oh, there you go. Okay.
I don't know what the last thing you heard was.
You were talking about the ability to have multiple things, a family, a job, a life, and all that. And so that they're not mutually exclusive. They help complement one another as you get to do what you really want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very difficult to divide those up and put them into, this bucket is plan A, this bucket is plan B, this bucket is plan C. I feel that if I had wanted to writing to be my career, if I wanted to achieve that in a monetized way, a lot of times artistic endeavors are not necessarily very good economically.
Okay, looks like we've stalled out again. I'm going to let you finish that thought in just a moment. It seems like we'll see if we can't pick you up in a little bit. There you go. You're starting to come back.
Yeah, so
Okay.
working a job to support you while you get better at something, I think that you could validly consider that a part of your art journey as well. I don't think there's any shame in that at all.
As a writer, it's probably like being in a candy store all the time when you're in the library. There's plenty to excite you about the potential.
No, it's so hard. I start 10 books at a time, and then I just have to kind of let them fight it out.
Yeah, that's good. Tim, would you like to wrap up this question for us?
Yes. So what everyone is hitting on is it doesn't feel like there has to be this dichotomy between plan A, plan B. There's a writer named David White who wrote a book about vocation, and I think it's called Crossing the Unknown Sea. And within it, he talks about there being a conversation between yourself and the world around you. You have within you the things that you want to do. You have the things that you want to make, the things that you want to pursue, the gifts that you want to give, and then you have the world around you that has certain needs and is asking for certain things. And it's okay for those things to be in constant conversation. And I would say an example of that was I wanted to be a singer-songwriter who toured and did albums. And what I found was there's this need for someone to be playing music within church settings and being creative with how you treated certain music. And I loved that. And I gravitated towards it because it was this need. And so I was able to be my creative self. And it wasn't the exact picture I had, but it morphed and I found great joy in it. And I would say that that's been a path for me often in my own creative endeavors is you say, I have these things that I'd like to make. And then someone says, oh, I want more of that. And you're like, okay, and you get excited, you kind of like branch off in these little ways.
It seems like it's not plan A or plan B. A lot of folks are working their way all the way through the alphabet to C, D, and W, Y, Z kind of thing. I will remind our audience that this is a good time to ask your question. We're going to go, we have one last question for our panelists, and then we're going to be getting into your questions as well. And so the last question for you all tonight is a brief one, and that is simply, what is the best advice you've received in your journey as a creative? And I think what I'd like to do is just kind of go around the horn, starting with Sarah.
I love this question, and I actually have two, and I couldn't choose which one to
Give us
share.
them both.
And I'll try to make it quick. My first one is the quote, "Find a need and fill it." And I think Tim, you were sort of alluding to this, that you know, when I'm feeling lost or not sure what the point of all of it is, I look for a need, whether it be something that someone else needs that I feel like maybe something I have to offer musically can help fill, or personally need that I, you know, may feel like I need to be fulfilled in some way, and I can do that musically. But also professionally, you know, if I'm looking for an opportunity and trying to be proactive in growing my career, finding a need and filling it is ultimately a kind of a business idea as well, right? So that's the first one. And then the second one comes from my dear former violin teacher from high school, Arkady Fomin. And he used to say to me, in terms of practicing, he'd go, "Dear, slow down." Which of course is great for practicing. But I think it's good for life too, because when we're so actively, you know, pursuing our careers and trying to juggle a billion different things and going 100 miles an hour, especially in today's society, we can lose track of the things that ultimately inspire what our art often reflects. And it can get a little heavy after a while if you're going that fast all the time. So reminding myself to slow down both in life and in practice is a good thing to do.
Slow down. That's wonderful. David, let's go to you next. What was a good piece of advice that you've heard? Be sure to unmute.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm going to briefly just kill my video, so maybe it'll help it not be quite so stop and start. So here we go.
Fair enough.
All right. So some of the best advice that I ever got is that your best resource is other artists. Specifically, it was told to me, you know, a writer's best resource is other writers. This is not something that you have to just try to brave alone. And someone was already kind of talking to that earlier on about with another question. But I believe that it's really true that people have different expertise in different areas of this. And there's just so much to learn for one person, to know how to do for one person. You know, Bree was talking about there's no shame in having someone do your website for you. And I think that it's a long journey. And I think that a lot of us tend to feel like we have to do it alone. And I just don't think that that's true. I've had so many people who have helped me to learn how to be a better writer, how to navigate the playing field, you know, how to connect with editors and agents and different folks. I've had so much help. I have too many people to acknowledge when I get to an acknowledgements page. And I think that's true of any artist. You know, you see any award show and people get up and they just have such a long laundry list of people to thank that it's like you just can't even get through it all. So I think that we can take a note off of that and just know that we don't have to try to do this alone, and we should get out there, especially for the very introverted folks. You know, it can be an effort, but it really is worth it to just get out there and meet some of the folks who have a similar passion and learn from them. And they can also learn from you, which is wonderful. But everything is going to be sort of a team exercise towards success. And you can support other people and they can support you. And there's nothing better when you do actually have some success than having people to share that success with. You know, it's a little empty if you accomplish something and there's just nobody to tell, you know. So that is the best advice I have ever gotten.
It is good advice. Thanks for sharing that. Bree, how about you? Best advice?
So two things, and I'll try and keep them brief. One of them is something actually my client and my friend Armando Silva says a bunch, which is, you know, always find ways to bring value into the conversation and into the room as an artist. Always be seeking, like, you know, what's the value that you specifically can bring to that situation. And then the second one from one of my teachers, guitarist Steve Kovalchuk, who I remember in graduate school told me something along the lines of, why would I expect you to be good at something you're doing for the very first time? Which I think about all the time, and think we all need to keep in mind as we're all constantly doing brand new things to us.
That's very comforting. Thank you, Bree. Tim, how about your advice?
I'll share two. One that I'm learning right now, and then one that was really important to me early on, 12, 13 years ago as an artist. The older one was velocity is the enemy of fear. And I loved that. It's this picture of a kid on a diving board staring at it and just nervous. And the more you sit back and think about it and overthink it, the scarier it'll be. Whereas if you just run and leap, you're going to end up where you're wanting to end up and create a big splash. And so velocity is the enemy of fear is one of my favorites. Here most recently that I'm learning, and this is especially in the area of marketing. I learned this from a writer named Donald Miller, but I think it's so applicable to me as a writer and as a storyteller and as a musician, as an artist. And it's you're not the hero of the story. And it's this picture of you're a guide. When it comes to being an artist, when it comes to sharing something, the person that you're giving this gift to, they're the hero of the story. They're the one who's going to find themselves wrapped up in it. And so as you speak about this thing, as you come to approach this thing, make it about them. Help love them and help them to be that hero in their story and be that guide that walks alongside them. There's a lot of nuances to that I don't have a chance to go into, but that's been really helpful for me, who tends to get a little bit self-focused when I write music or when I produce something. And especially as an artist, I'm like, it's about me and my experience. And I love that quote, that which is most personal is most universal, which I just looked up, Dan. I think it's by Carl Rogers. He's a psychologist, but it's been quoted by Henry Nouwen and other people too. But so I feel like it should be from here, but we can play that role of guide.
I like the idea of Sherpas, art Sherpas everywhere around us. Travis, bring us home. What was your best piece of advice?
Going for brevity here. Progress, comma, not perfection. Perfectionism kills artists and dead in their tracks. So I would say, progress, not perfection. What is the very smallest, best next step that you can take towards your goal and accomplish that little guy? That's it. Okay, I'm done.
Be profound and then leave. Okay. Thank you so much. I think this has been a thought-provoking and entertaining and interesting set of ideas. I think, Lynn, we're ready for any questions that you'd like to share with the group. And for any of you that would like to respond, just kind of hold up your hand, and not everybody has to respond to every question. So Lynn, what would be one of the questions that the group would like to pose to this?
Okay.
panel?
So Pam asks, at what age did you decide that the creative work was your mission in life?
Sarah said it started in the womb, but
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No. Tim, would you like to start?
Well, a lot of times for these questions, I don't have an immediate, it's all these incremental things, but on this question, I did, it was when I turned 30, and that's old for an artist, or for a musician. For me, I felt like I had wanted to be a songwriter. I wanted to do these different things. But it was when I turned 30 and had my first kid, and I'd been married for 5 years. I said, hey, I have to take this seriously as a part of my life. It can't be this thing over here. It has to be something that I actively invest in and develop and enjoy. And so that's when I made a website. That's when I had Bree was talking about, I had a plan of what I was going to do. I had some goals. And so I was older, but it was when I was 30 that I said, I want to do this. I want to create, I want to share it, and I want to do it well. And so, yeah, it's only been 12 years for me. And so I still feel like a novice.
Who else wants to share their moment of awareness when they wanted to be a creative? Travis.
Couldn't quite hear you, Becky.
I think you had your hand up that you wanted to be the next. Yeah.
I'll just say that I tripped over it multiple times in my life, kind of got up and kept moving and trip over it and get up and keep moving. So it's way through my life, probably since I was, 8 years old or something. I really remember painting with water on concrete because that was cheap and because it would disappear and the cleanup was pretty darn easy. And like I have these vivid images of these things happening throughout my life. And then they kind of just crystallized at some point in college when I really struggled with, am I going to be a teacher or am I going to be an artist? And I was like, maybe there's a way to do both. And so that's when I started fighting for it, I guess you would say.
David, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I don't remember. It's it's all shades of gray. I feel like I would play with Transformer toys, and I was very insistent that they had to go through a complete emotional character arc whenever I was, crafting stories with them. So how long ago was that? So maybe a couple of weeks ago that was, and obviously as a child. But my brother and I, we kind of grew up in the panhandle of Texas. And so we always had to create our own fun. That was what we were always saying. So we'd put on plays for our parents all the time and that sort of thing. I think we just kind of naturally inclined into it without necessarily thinking about making it any kind of a life plan. But I think that we have those inclinations in us. We have those passions and they come out in the ways that they do. So
great. Very nice. Bree or Sarah, either one of you want to answer that one as well? Sarah, yeah.
Sure. I think I don't know that I necessarily knew that it would be a creative work, so to speak, but I was fortunate enough to grow up with a lot of music in my life. None of my family members were professional musicians, but music was always happening in my household. And my father actually plays the guitar as a hobby. And so we went to a music store one day and I saw a violin hanging on the wall and thought, oh, that's a guitar my size. I was about 7 years old. And I said, Dad, I want to play the little guitar. Because that's not a guitar, that's a violin. And fortunately, the person that owned the store played the violin and got it down and demonstrated it. And I was just like, and that was the end of that. So I think, it just was one of those things that I fell in love with. And my parents probably thought it was a trend and they may still be waiting for me to get over it. No, I'm just kidding. It was just sort of always a thing for me. And it's morphed as far as its outlets and stuff. But yeah.
Eddie Halen of small guitars. Huh? That works. Bree, did you have a moment of awareness?
I mean, I think I was a band kid growing up, again, kind of like Sarah, I had the privilege of being involved in music from a pretty young age. And I think by probably about 16 or so, knew it was a career I wanted to pursue, but didn't know specifically what it would look like. And of course, it's continued to evolve, and as everyone's career does. And so, just grateful for all of that.
Good. Lynn, another question perhaps.
Yes, Kari asks, are there ways that you all check in with your passions in the sense of recentering when you feel uncertain or too negative?
Travis, okay, Bree, you've got your hand up, yeah.
I was just gonna say, for me, there's a lot of different hats I wear and a lot of things that get put on my schedule. And it's easier than you would think for me to go multiple days or even a week or two, and not really make a ton of music. So I have to prioritize it in a really structured way, which means literally blocking time in my schedule, putting it, at a time of day when I know I'm most energetic and creative. And sometimes that means literally not getting other things done. But I find if I'm personally like feeling just kind of cranky, irritable about work at large, almost always it's tied back to the fact that I haven't given myself time to make something that's not for a project or deadline in a while. So I just try and give myself some space to do that, which is easier than said than done, particularly depending on your situation, your household. But it's really, I think it's really, really important.
Travis, you had been nodding your head. You have a thought about that?
I have a couple of thoughts how to work around that. So one of them is just to be grateful. Just stop what you're doing and remember most of our problems are first world problems. Put it in perspective. The world's not going to stop spinning if I don't get a painting perfect. So the other thing is I take like the month of July usually and I try and just play. I try and make a lot of mistakes. I try new stuff. And it evolves your style when you solve mistakes and when you start to work through that. So it really, your style is the culmination of how you've solved mistakes that you've made. And then my final one is I'll just stop. If it's, I know pretty much when that's going to happen in my studio work. If it's time to stop and walk away, I go have an adventure. My adventures are usually related to going outdoors. Could be a walk in a park nearby, or it could be going fishing or whatever. But those are ways that I work around it. So those might help Kari a little bit.
Resets. Anything else anyone would like to contribute? Or yeah, Sarah.
I go in my bathroom and shut the door and turn off the lights and play. I know that sounds crazy, but true story. I think for me, sometimes it can get very negative or uncertain if I'm focused too much on technique and the actual execution of certain things. And so to step away from that and kind of like what Travis was saying, just play, just listen to your voice, just allow yourself to create in a really free, less structured way. That's definitely really, really helpful. And something else that helps me is to connect with folks and make sure that I'm playing music with other people, which has been especially hard right now. Luckily, my partner is also a musician, so I have that kind of built in my home life. But that really helps me get out of my head for sure, to be able to make music with other people, because ultimately, for me at least, it's about connecting. And then, yeah, I get outside. I think going and standing in an aspen grove and being reminded that being on this planet as a human is such a small little blip in the long, bigger spectrum can be very grounding and bring an odd sense of peace. So those are the things that I do.
Lynn, do we have time for one last question?
Well, I don't have a question, but I think that this is a timely moment for this comment, which is from John Hafley, and that's thanks to each of you sharing your wisdom about the arts and life. It's obvious you are passionate about your arts and creativity, and I know you have all impacted countless people. Thanks for your efforts.
What a wonderful note for us to close this webinar on. And I would like to personally thank each of you, Travis Krause, Sarah Off, Brianna Harris, Tim Coons, and David Sharp, for being just outstanding in sharing your personal stories and the interactions between you and the relatability of this topic to this really important time in our lives when we're trying to make sense of a lot of things that are sometimes confusing, or that we are kind of questioning legitimacy and our purpose in doing what we're doing. And you've added and enriched, I think, the sense and given permission to do just what we do and to love it as we do it. So there's some wonderful quotes that came out of this evening. There are some wonderful things that you'll be able to listen to again if you'd like. This was a recorded session, and we will be posting it onto our Greeley Creative District website. So if you heard a quote or had heard somebody mention something that really kind of tickled you a bit and you want to go back and think about it again, please feel free to get back on and check this out once more. Share it with folks that you think would also find it refreshing and interesting. And we would love to hear from you as well if there are follow-ups or other topics that you'd like us to explore with our Cacophony of Creatives. And with that, again, thank you on behalf of the Greeley Creative District. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, and have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.